Okay, thank you for that, Matthew. So that we can start, do you mind doing roll call, please?
Yes. Give me 1 second. Okay. And Alejandra, could you just give me a little bit of direction? I also staff the Reimagining Public Safety Committee, but we do not do roll call. So just go through the list and read everyone's names.
Yes, and then people could just say whether they're here or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Reed. Kimberly Walton.
I am here.
Okay, got it. Lashandra Rayfield.
I'm here.
Katie McFadden.
Here.
Omar Salam.
Here it's Salem.
Salem, sorry.
No problem.
Alejandra Ibanez.
Here.
Darlene Cannon.
Here.
Jane Grover.
Here.
Carla Thomas.
I'm here.
Great. And Kimberly Richardson is not here. So.
Okay, great. That's everyone, and we have quorum. And Omar, I haven't gotten a chance to meet you yet. Good to meet you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And please know, children and pets are always welcome in our meetings because we all know we're at home. This is our reality. So bring your full selves, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. The first thing on our agenda is the approval of our November 18th meeting minutes. I wonder if folks have gotten a chance to review those. Does anybody need a few minutes to review them before we vote on their approval? Sounds like no. Okay, can we?
I move
Go for it.
approval of our minutes from our meeting on November 18th, 2021.
Can someone second that?
Yeah.
Cool. All those voting in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any nays?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you for the vote. Those meeting minutes have been passed. Okay, next thing we have on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody on the phone with us today that would like to make public comment? And I wonder, Matthew, if anybody signed up. I'm not sure if you get that list, but is there anyone on the call today that would like to make public comment? I know we've got Andy Schlickman, who's going to make a presentation a little bit later from the public. Is there anyone else that would like to make any comment tonight? Okay. All right, next on the agenda, this is moving a bit too fast for me. I feel like I'm out of place. We actually are the staff, the city manager staff, and Carla and I support that we discuss the nomination of both the chair and the vice chair. Carla and I's term is actually up in, I believe it's up in March, but we're moving it. We're aiming to be able to have new chairs, or at least find a replacement, since I will actually be stepping down as chair and I will be leaving the commission in the next 2 months. Jane, I didn't. So I will be stepping down. As I've shared with some of you all, my new position, my new job is really taking me really out of, leaving me almost without any free time. And of course, as you can imagine, as a mother of 3 teenagers, I have plenty at home to do. So I was hired as the founding executive director of Illinois Unidos. It's a statewide organization that advocates for the equitable response, recovery, and resources for the state's Latinx community. And it's exciting, but it's overwhelming. And I'm probably just as busy as you are, but I think after a term and a half as a commissioner on this equity commission, it's time to pass it on, leave room for new members. And I just want to be able to do what I do well. And right now, my job and getting my junior ready for college takes plenty of my time. That's a job in itself, right, Jane? Fellow mother of 3 sons. So with that, we wanted to engage in conversation about nominating current commissioners who would be interested in these positions. And Carla, I'll put this out there. I'm the one who is leaving. Carla is still staying on our commission, and I hope, and I won't speak on your behalf, is willing to stay on as a chair. But Matthew, I want to lean on you. I wonder if you had gotten a chance to see the nomination process. But before I put that on you, Carla, is anything you want to share as we start talking about this position and your interest, whether you want to stay on as a chair or not?
Hi, so I'm happy to stay on as a chair. Again, if there are other people who want to step up, that's fine too. I feel like I have some goals that I want to achieve on this while I'm here on this commission, like seeing stuff through, not that I'm doing it all by myself by any means. 2 of those things are, getting this, whether it turns out to be biannual or whatever, survey off the ground so that we, none of us are going to be here forever, but that we at least give the city a starting point with this survey. So it's a baseline. And hopefully they keep it up in a regular manner. So that getting that sort of off the ground, as well as getting the equity scorecard / assessment tool, so that this ongoing group, whether it's us or other people, can use it to sort of critique, for lack of a better word, but all part of the process, and analyze the equity tenets or merits of all different types of policies that come down the road. So I'm committed to stay till I kind of help see that lift off. Again, I don't have to be chair to do that. So those are my things. If other people kind of want to try their hand, there will be no upset on my end. Those are the 2 things I'm kind of holding and running with.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
First,
Yes, Commissioner Grover.
First, the order of business, and if Carla's willing, then let me make it formal and nominate her for continuing chair of the Equity Empowerment Commission for another year. Please and thank you, Carla, very much. And then second, Alejandra, congratulations and thank you to you for all your service on this commission. It's been really wonderful to be in the same space with you here and do all this work and follow your lead on so many things. So would you, if you would share the name of the organization where you're going to in our chat, if it's got a website, I'd love to know more, but congratulations and thank you. And yes. Carla, thanks for saying yes. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Jane. Yes, this sure has been a ride. I think we have really, been digging our hands into really identifying the kind of vision, aspiration, and goals that we want to lead in this city. It's been a bumpy road. I don't know how clear the vision was at first. It really didn't seem very clear, and we've really leaned into it. And I really appreciate Carla's engagement. She really has been a force in really challenging us to be focused on goals, and making sure that we are not getting pulled or taken out of focus of what we want to do. And so just know, while I served as chair for less than a year, really this role requires you to participate as you already do, participating in our monthly meetings. The role that I have played has been really just to help support the creation and development of the agenda, facilitating meetings, and just keep us moving. And as you have seen and experienced, Carla really has been, as co-chair, the person who really gets us to focus in on our goals and getting things done. And so it's been a tag team of having somebody who's both the visionary and moving us in focus. And then really my role has been to support that by helping the kind of like the business side, getting the agenda together and facilitating. And so, filling my role would be for somebody maybe who's open to helping get together with the city managing staff to put agendas together and to be supportive and facilitating these meetings and making sure that I don't know if I want to necessarily say follow Robert's rules of order, because as you know, that also is not my bread and butter, but really helping us create the agenda, move agenda, and keep us on task. And so,
Maybe-
and I don't know.
I was going to say, just to put some guidelines around that piece of meeting with the city manager, normally Kimberly's gone now, but it'd be Matthew would reach out to us about a week and a half before the meeting. We will have a short 15-minute meeting where we discuss what are the things that need to go on the agenda, and kind of figure out if there's any documentation we want to send out in the pre-email. So it's like a 15-minute meeting. No, it's not a big extra deal before this official meeting.
Commissioner Grover, is there anything else that you would share as a former chair of anything else that the position calls for?
No, I'm just glad that you mentioned that I was a former chair, which automatically disqualifies me from taking on the role again. So thanks much. No, it's exactly as you said. It's keeping on top of agenda planning and being the connection with city staff. And I think I nominate, and then it's at our next meeting, we nominate, and then at the next meeting, we actually present motions to appoint.
Does anybody have any questions or have interest that they might want to share with us tonight?
Yeah, now's not the time to be shy. So, I mean, like, I'm holding back. There's several of you I'd love to see in this position. I'm holding back because I don't, like, I don't know, maybe it's the newfound educator in me. Like, they try to cut out this idea of calling on people in class, right? Like, let people sort of fill in where they or participate where they want to be. So now's not the time to be shy. If you have interest, I don't want to call somebody's name and then they feel on the spot and they like say okay, and then but this is not really what I want to do. You could feel free to send me or Alejandra a private message if you don't want to call it out, whatever. But like, if anybody has interest, or if anybody feels like they'd like to half put their foot in the game, and one of us or both of us have a meeting with you to kind of discuss, so you wrap your hands around what it is, and make a final decision whether you're fully in the ring or whatever, you could let us know that. And I mean, maybe because I know her a little bit, I'll maybe put LaShandra in the spotlight a little bit and say that I think she would also make a wonderful co-chair, but I'm not going to do it to anybody else. I don't know. I don't want to mess with it.
Actually just messaged you. Am I muted still?
I was trying to be a little subtle about it, but anyway.
But I was like, I'm really new. So I was like, I don't know if that even is the proper, so I mean, I'm interested, but I just would like to have, I guess, some further conversation, because I am a new commissioner. And so this is a new appointment, and I don't want to, there's people who have been on this commission longer than me and know more than I do. So that's the only reason why I'm hesitant. So yeah. So I'll put my pinky toe in and wait for everyone else to decide what they want to do.
All right. And just to kind of add to that, when LaShandra still first came to our commission, she shared with us that what she does for a living is equity in more of a school capacity, but this is kind of her bread and butter. And so I couldn't think of a better partner to help move along in that way.
Well, I'll go ahead and say, I think I'm probably one of the other few people that's been out here the longest. So if you're worried about getting in front of me, don't worry about it. I am not in a capacity to take on the chair or co-chair role. So you all are more than welcome to raise your hand if that's what you would like to do.
LaShondra, are you interested?
I thought that I was unmuted. I'm so silly. I'm sorry. This has been my day with me. Yeah, I am interested. Yes, I am interested.
And then I will also reach out to you between now and next meeting and make sure I meet with you. So you
Yeah.
get like more of a picture.
May I make it formal then and nominate LaShondra Rayfield for the position of co-chair of the Equity Empowerment Commission? So we have 2 nominees. And LaShondra, if you decide in talking to Carla that it's not something, I'll withdraw the nomination, but just to create some momentum in that positive direction, can you be nominated?
Yes, ma'am, I can be. My only hesitation literally was the newness of my role in the commission. That was my only nomination. As far as the work, that part I'm fine with.
We're not hesitating.
Okay, there you go. So yes, I will accept the nomination for that role.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Have any interest? Okay. All right, well, we have 2 nominations. We can, please feel free to reach out to Carla or myself with any questions. We'd love to make ourselves available to answer your questions. But I believe the next step is for us to answer those questions, make ourselves available. In our next meeting, we will take those formal nominations and take a vote. Does that sound about right, team? Wonderful. Okay. Thank you again, Carla, for agreeing to stay on, and thank you, LaShondra, for your interest. And thank you all for continuing to be active and engaged.
I also just want to kind of thank Alejandra for helping see us through this transition smoothly, and she'll be in the meeting next week as well. And
Right.
I want to officially say it's been a pleasure to work on you. Not work on you, Jesus.
I
Work
understood.
with you. And I feel like Alejandra and my kind of skill sets really complemented each other in the time that we were here. And thank you for your time and service to, Evanston Broadscale. So
You've got it. You've got it. I'll still be living here. My children will still be in D65 and D202. So, and I'm on the south end. So if anybody ever wants to hang out once we're past the worst of this, you are welcome to the 8th Ward to come visit me.
at this rate, let's make a date for 2030.
Yeah, let's do that. Hopefully not that far away. All right, team. So next on our agenda, we are gonna speak about our community equity survey that Carla has been leading us in. Carla, do you mind giving us an update of where we're at?
Yes, so we have officially turned it over to the department in the city that is going to translate it. So, and maybe do a little copyright because, all the grammar isn't always my favorite thing. And so we originally had a plan for February. Was it after Martin Luther King weekend or February? Either way, I think it's a little pushed back because of the holiday. But at this point, and Matthew can kind of tell us a little further, as soon as the, is it Patrick from the city is complete with the translation, it will be good to go out. Many of you may not remember, I can't remember if you were here because this kind of started a while ago. There was a meeting we had where we had an Excel spreadsheet where we put in sort of a list of the people that don't always respond to these. And we made a commitment to do more than just hey, the mayor emailed it out and who did we get? Affluent white ladies. I mean, the statistics say, I'm not just making that up. So we are going beyond this idea of like, we sent an email, everybody had a fair chance to answer it. And we are targeting to make sure we have the groups we hear from. Originally, when we started this, we were asked, well, how long do you want to leave this open for? And I was like, I put questions in there to ensure that we were getting demographics on socioeconomics, race, which ward they're in. And so the goal is to have it go out in those regular ways. We created a list of kind of groups that we wanted to make sure we heard from. And aside from what all the folks are doing, in terms of sending it out in their newsletter, and the mayor's doing and sending it out in his email newsletter. We have a list of people and organizations that we're going to send it with an email asking them to share this within their community. Then, because we have the demographics, we'll be able to say, oh, who are we not hearing from that we want to hear from, right? We can't say we want to hear about, because housing is in there, we want to hear the perspective of homeless folks, and then the mayor sent an email, right? Who sometimes have cell phones with internet, they use at the library and other place, but they don't have it consistently. So we need to make sure that we're figuring out what organizations have contact with homeless folks, and we're finding a way to get it to them so that they can get it in front of them. So we're sort of gonna hunt down, not in a kind of crazy Hunger Games way, but if we say we want community engagement and we want to make sure that we fulfill these groups, we're going to hunt down those groups and make sure we get there. So maybe multiple phases, and then we may come back to this brainstorming of like, hey guys, we said we wanted to get X population and we're really sucking. Brainstorm again. Who do you know who's within that community, who can send it out to a list of their friends, send it out to the people from their church, whatever. So we're targeting business owners, like local nonprofit / community organizations, and then just people who are sort of thought leaders or within a community, and asking them to spread it.
Is there, I think that was the spreadsheet and whatnot was before I joined, but is there like a cut score that we're looking for? We're looking for 70% of this particular population across the board. We're looking for 80%. I know 100% would be awesome, but what are we saying is if we hit this percentage, then we feel like that's a good representation.
Yeah, and so what I always say, I like stuff to be proportional to the population, right? And some of those things are easiest to figure out. We have numbers that tell us like what percentage of the community is Asian, what percentage of the community is whatever, right? But we don't have necessarily what percentage of the community has a disability, for instance, right? So I think, we're searching for proportion or something close to proportion where we have the data. And past that, I honestly haven't thought about like what we do about the other categories. We could process that a little bit. Or if anybody has survey, I don't have broad scale. I've only done surveys within organizations. And then we try to make sure that all we normally have within an organization, because it's normally, these are often, most of the time they're anonymous. We just try to make sure that we're getting feedback from each department. But so anybody who's used to like more public forums, if you have any ideas, but on the stuff we have data for, we'll look for proportion. The rest, I don't have an answer.
Makes sense.
Jane, I know that at your place of work, you put out a lot of surveys. What is what's considered a satisfactory response rate?
So when we've done surveys, I don't manage those parts of our community engagement. We understand that a scientifically sound kind of sampling is more than 2,000 people responses.
But 2,000 out of how many?
Just 2,000 from whatever sample, right? So if you've got 2,000 to 3,000 for samples, that is scientifically a good sampling. That's what we always get many more in our surveys that we do, our public opinion surveys. But that's what I understood what it takes. But to Carla's point, it's about seeing if you can get more representational of what the actual demographic share is for each demographic in our community. So I did post the snapshot, the data snapshot that my agency, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, prepares for every one of the 284 municipalities in our region, and including a bunch of Chicago neighborhoods. So that might be, as Carla said, it doesn't tell you a lot of stuff, but it does tell you languages spoken at home. It does tell you those kinds of things. That might be useful. This
is very useful. There are a couple of things here we can equate. So while we don't know socioeconomics in here, but if we wanted to make sure we're hearing from, different socioeconomic groups, we do have education, and in some spaces those kind of parallel. And then we have the languages. So I was actually thinking of certain communities. Like we often think of, well, sorry, we don't often enough think of the Latinx community, but when we are thinking about communities that are non-white or Black, we tend to just go there next. But you know, we have quite we have a decent Eastern European. You guys can hear my kids shouting in the background. Eastern European folks and different Asian populations that often get ignored. And so I think with the languages, we can sort of make some sort of appropriate, again, this is not for statistics class, but there's a lot in here that we can use in several ways. So.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is
Thank you,
updated
Jane.
every year, and I'm happy to share it every time we update it. It is good information.
Yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And this one that you're sharing right here, Jane, is most updated to 2020?
Yeah, so it included the 2020 census plus additional data that comes in through the American Community Survey, whatever it is. So that gets incorporated in, and we update this every year in June. I think
Okay.
June.
Okay.
And if you're ever interested in talking to folks about how we do this, August 2021 release, so it was updated, this one in 2021. And then it's kind of interesting because it does track some other indicators, including work from home, where do you commute to, where do most people commute in and out of, what's your water source, what's the cost compared to other places for paying
Yeah.
for water, that kind of thing.
So
But
the class when I was in school, the one class that I really struggled with was statistics. And so, but I wonder, does it make sense as we look at least at the data we do know, like race and ethnicity? Do we want to at least hit the current population percentage? So for instance, for Hispanic Latinos, they're showing up at 11.7%. So do we want to get at least, 11 or 12% of the respondents to be Latino? The Black population is 15.9. So
That's the proportions I spoke of, like the proportion of the whatever number we get.
Right. But I'm asking it in this way because I wonder, because we know that that communities of color, at least in Evanston, that we have really not gotten engagement, their engagement in surveys historically. So would having an equitable, like kind of like an equity commitment mean that we would want a higher percentage of folks who have not participated in surveys, or will we be satisfied at keeping it to the current percentage of the population? Do you get what I'm saying? So if Latinos are 11%, will 11% of their participation in the survey be sufficient?
Yeah, I would say we would put maybe give, ourselves goals of a window, and the percentage of the population would be the floor of the window. I guess if you're talking about equity, these are the people it most affects. And not only racially, right? We're supposed to be focused on race, but we took the opportunity, we discussed this before, we took the opportunity to ask other questions, because if this becomes our sort of, these surveys are often equated with sort of livability and like affordability and these kind of things. And if we're looking at the whole picture, we included other things about people who feel discriminated around because of their religion or LGBTQ status and other things. And so, I'm happy to put a floor at the percentage of the population with a window that we can go above that. So,
yeah.
I want to dream big, but we're already starting from a place where we rarely get. So I'd be happy to hit the proportion as our first time goal out of the gate.
Got it. Yeah. And then do we have the sign up sheet that we can share with folks again, so that people could put in maybe whether it's a listserv they have access to or different institutions that commissioners can recommend that the survey be shared with? Because I know I can recommend at least 3 different institutions that I can provide access to for the survey to be sent out. For instance, you know, I work with Evanston Latinos, and I know they have on Facebook at least a listserv of 700 Evanston individuals. I also work with Lens, which is a Latino group that works at ETHS. So they have a lot of parents. And then also my family's part of St. Nick's Church, and they have, I believe, probably the highest Latino population in a religious institution in Evanston. So do we have the link, Carla, of where people
Yeah.
can sign up and provide that?
I'm looking for it now. I will share it as soon as I find it, but then also we will send it out again. Matthew, I'll make sure I send it to you to send out sort of in the packet for next time, so people can kind of do it on their own as well, not just while we're working on it here. So I'm looking for it now.
Okay. Do folks have any questions or comments before we move on? No. Carla, is there anything else on the survey? Oops, I'm sorry, LaShondra, did I hear you?
It was me. I was just going to thank Carla for all the work that she did on the survey, pulling it together. Let's drum up some business.
And then we will be, the point of the email outreach, aside from email/text as well, but aside from the emails from the mayor and the alderperson, is that if somebody you know sends you the email, you're more likely to take it seriously, as opposed to, hey, the mayor emailed, right? Like in his regular monthly email. I mean, cool guy and everything, but like, so I'm gonna be asking you guys to think about, one, sending it out to your group of friends or network or whatever, but also think about the other people who are in your network, who you know sort of will have their own network that might be slightly different to you guys, and kind of, I'll be sending out, I'll be creating an email that can go to sort of those other nodes of networks where you're asking that person to then share it to theirs as well. Again, if there's a personal commitment or personal attachment to these requests, they're way more likely to get filled out.
Absolutely.
Is there a way, I know this is Survey Monkey, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, because that's what the Evanston has a account in.
Okay. Now, I was just I'm just less familiar with the interface with Survey Monkey. Does it allow the survey to be as a part of the body of the email, or you have to click on the link? Does anyone happen to know? Because the reason why I'm asking, because I send out questionnaires and surveys a lot, and the higher response I get is when I have the survey open in the text, so they can actually start to answer it then, instead of because that second step to click on the link, for some reason, deters working adults.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering.
Matthew, that's beyond my sort of tech grade, but maybe something worth sharing, asking Patrick. And I know I have experience getting them where I see like 3 questions in the email and I'm like, all right, I'll answer these 3. And then I click the submit, and then I was like, well, damn, there's some more. And that's kind of how it's going to be for ours, because I think there are 4 pages. We divide it up, and the whole point in dividing it up when you do these surveys is if somebody doesn't complete it, at least you got the initial information. And so that's why, rather than having all, 15 questions on 1 page and somebody gets bored halfway through and you get nothing out of it because they never press submit. But ask Patrick if that's, I don't know.
Yeah, I can do that. And I think, yeah, if you've seen it before, I think then from city operations, then I think that is something that we can do, at least to do some survey questions in the.
Yeah, I just popped in. I'm just thinking about like the elderly, like, going to a second site, going to a second page, people who are not necessarily, the links, they don't know that the blue means that it's a hyperlink, things like that. It's always nice to have the survey right there. So thank you for doing that.
Alrighty. Thanks for everything. Thanks again, Carla, and thanks for all the questions, and thanks for doing that follow-up, Matt. We're looking forward to getting this out. For discussion on the agenda, we have development of an equity review tool. Carla, I know, do you want to give us just a quick
me.
update? I know this is relatively new.
Yeah, it's right. We have a draft. I didn't send it out because I don't want it getting out there in its drafty form. But I will share my screen. And I will share my screen if I can get my shit together. 1 second. Oh, wait, who's running this meeting? I don't have the ability to share my screen. It's not there. If we could change that. Oh, no, there it is.
1 second.
I got it. I am apparently not functioning today. All right, so are you guys seeing my screen? Okay, perfect. So again, like the survey, we are not the first people on the face of the earth to think, oh, might be a good idea to do a survey. And so what I did with the survey, I didn't sort of create it out of thin air. My experience with equity is in like educational settings and nonprofits. So I wanted to go and see what are the people who know what they're doing with municipalities, doing with equity surveys. And so similarly, what are the people who know what they're doing in municipalities, doing with scorecards? The challenge always with these scorecards is that, one, we don't want to just say, I think it's a 6. It sounds 6-ish to me, right? Like we can't, it's not about putting a number, but often I have experienced over time, if you put just, I've seen these scorecards where it's just like, how are they doing? 1 second, I have screaming children.
That was just me. They're blasting music behind me.
Right. Sorry. I've seen scorecards where it's only text. So people fill in how they feel about it and there's no number. And what happens is that while that qualitative response is great for context, so if somebody reading it could understand like what truly are the problems because somebody took the time to write it out, often people don't read. And so I have found it best to have both the qualitative and a score. So if somebody does put a 6, you have right next to it kind of why they were feeling it was 6-ish. And normally it's out of 5, so I don't know why I chose 6, but whatever. So, you know, there are places in here where things are red, but I'm going to try to explain, and I don't have a problem emailing it out, but I really ask that this is not shared because it really is in sort of a working document. So first thing we do is kind of explain to people why, when are you using the equity scorecard, what an equity scorecard is, and kind of discuss like the scoring system of the equity scorecard. So you'd be giving something a 0 if we think it's a harmful policy. If it's a broad-based policy, meaning like it appears to be race neutral, you know, I want to, treat everybody equally. And interestingly enough, I chose this layout, just the main layout from a Metro Transit equity document. But I used 4 different documents that I kind of, I like this piece of this. I like the way they handle this. They had a better description of this. So I use this layout is similar to what they did. But when they described equity at the beginning, they talked about treating everybody fairly. And I'm like, well, Jesus, I'm sure they paid some consultants tons of money. And starting off, we don't have a definition, like they don't have the correct definition of what equity is. So then I chose to put a definition here of what equity is and like what the scorecard is used for from a different place. So yeah, something that appears to be race neutral, a broad-based policy that kind of leaves things kind of as they are. So it's not you're spending all this money to go out with whatever this policy or plan is, but it's not really going to change the lack of equity in whatever field it touches. And then at least half the policy targets a community of color in equitable ways. And then it's a 5 where the entire policy is committed to that. So again, as I mentioned, there's going to be sort of a scoring piece of it, but there's also going to be an analysis piece of it. And this is kind of where it gets trickier. We talk about who should use the scorecard. I do have a question here about whether we think community members should be using the scorecards. If you guys can envision with me, the scorecard exists, it's out there. We have spoken in the past that the main way we came to this is that we want to be able to, as organized equity, the equity arm, it might be a pinky, it might be we might actually be a mole, not really a pinky, but as the equity mole of Evanston, we should have some sort of way to weigh in on policies coming down the pike or an existing policy that is brought to attention either because somebody in this group, we decides what we want to work on because there's been enough of a public uprising about it, because somebody from the city council comes to us. So we understand that we will be using this. The hope is that, and part of my goal here is that this will get signed off by the city council. So once they sign off and approve it, technically they need to be using it because they approved it. But so we ideally, we see that ideally, whether it's this version or a version they come up with of their own, departments in the city should be doing their own review of this equity scorecard before it gets to us. If the cake is half baked before we do the equity thing, the truth is we've all seen it. They're gonna continue baking that cake, no matter what we say, right? But this is the power we have. We're trying to create the tool and then we will try to disseminate it as much. So we have all the ways of how the government planners or whatever entity should use it. I wondered if we saw a situation where community members might do it. Is this such that there's a policy happening or there's a rumbling of a policy? And let's say I'm just going to use Connections just because affordable housing and stuff is on my mind, and Connections because they work with homeless folks, etc., and they have a better hold of that, the needs of that population. Besides, whoa, this is going to be problematic, and Connections could sit and fill this out and send it to who, I don't know, maybe send it to us as the EEC. So, I mean, people could kind of get off mic and see if anybody has experience with this, if they see this being used sort of from the community, turning it back to us. Just a question.
So when you say community members, just because you use Connections, that's the reason why I'm will we be saying organizations that work with the broader community? Is that what we mean?
Yeah, I should add organizations here too.
So instead of like just the individual.
Yeah.
Or,
and I mean, it's very unlikely, although, you know, we're all sort of extra here in Evanston, including myself. And everybody's got 69 degrees. So maybe, you know, like, not that you have to be a genius to do this, but it does take a little bit of work, right? And effort. So yes, there are some people who will pick it up and go through on their own, but I see it more likely that some group, it could be a parent interest group, or I guess maybe not so much parent because it's not school related, but it could be a neighborhood interest group of some sort, but I just kind of use them as an example, but I will add and organizations there.
Because I would actually, I mean, at my first glance, I would actually argue that or the community members would be community organizations, just because they would have the voice of the community instead of because community members would open it up to anyone who may just be, and this sounds awful, but may just be disgruntled but not have the background knowledge to back it up. So at that point, like, you know, and that gets touchy because you want to hear directly from the community, but you also want it to be like if you have a grievance, you want it to be an informed grievance, not just because you're a parking space, so they took too long picking their kids up in the line to get your kids, you know, car line. So so I would think organizations instead of individual members.
And I could say from an equity, I was going to suggest something, so I'll like suggest it, but then poke my own holes in it. With this idea of community engagement and making sure that community has a voice, kind of always in every way, it could be that, yes, because I hear you, right? We don't want to give ourselves, we don't want to release stuff and then like every time they carry Sam and George starts turning in one and then who's got to review this shit but us, and like we don't have the back. So we don't want to set something in motion that we can't truly manage. But we could potentially do something like community members can always also turn it in if it's co-signed or whatever by 10 people or something like that. But then I poked my own hole in that because I was like, that's also an equity thing because, you know, who's more likely to have networks, right? Like, is it the immigrant person who, you know, just moved here 3 years ago? Or is it the guy, you know, who lives on the lake who can get his friends to, anyway, that's a whole different story. So that was one idea I came up with, but I see some equity issues in that as well.
You know what, I think, you know, we would have our own framework attached to this, right? So the idea is that folks are using the scorecard along with the framework that we endorse or create or whatever, so that the criteria that is used is already provided this report card, so it doesn't get used and abused, right? So that they're working off of a framework that our commission supports. I mean, because this could be used, I think, across the community. Like, I wonder, you know, when maybe there's a development that's being proposed in the ward that I live in, right? And maybe, you know, the alderperson then engages in hosts a community hearing or a community meeting, and then this scorecard is used, but it would be attached to a framework. So it's not like people would just use their own opinion, right? It would actually, they'd be using a framework that
We're coming to kind of some of what that looks like.
Okay.
But also to the point that you just made, the other piece of this that actually comes before it, but we started here, is we talked about how we can't review just starting here, where it should never start here, right? It should never start. By the time we hear about a policy, it's half-baked or fully baked, right? So it shouldn't start here, but this is what we got. We can't be in the business of reviewing every policy that comes to city council or every building. Yeah, but we said we would do some sort of like, does it hit these criteria? And if it hits 4 of these 7 or 5 of these 7, we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but they would be criteria. So I guess that's another sort of, like, it would have to hit the criteria for a group to have us review it. So, yeah, so contemplate that. I wasn't sure if we wanted to open it up to community members, but or / organizations, but we can kind of define that. I will create the final steps once we're done with it. So there's an initial page that kind of just is sort of what's the name of the policy, who's this requesting this review. Sometimes it's going to be us doing it. Sometimes the city council something's going to come before them. They're going to say, you know what, I'd like the equity committee to review that and give us, just like you would have the finance guy review it from a budget perspective, kind of have us review it, or an organization might do it or whatever. Who's leading it, what's the contact, because we'll have questions for them and kind of describing what the policy is, big picture, or the project. Like, what's the community profile, like who is this affecting? Is it the 9th ward? Is it whatever? Is it a housing thing? So it's for, you know, the homeless population or people who need more affordable housing. So that's kind of just all the kind of pre stuff. So now it comes to the actual thing that gets filled out. Now, there are 2 things. I'm going to start with the more general one. So I'm going to come back to the stuff that I'm leaving. The thing about creating these things and why they tend to be very vaguey generally, which is great because nobody knows what kind of policies coming down or projects coming down the pike. So it has to be kind of broad. But sometimes when it gets really broad, what happens is that people could just bullshit their way through it because it didn't ask any really direct questions. So like we're in this kind of middle space. So my thought, again, this is just a draft, is that we have a general scorecard, which is, this is kind of an attempt to be, so whatever the issue here is, let's say it was the TIF, not to ruffle anybody's feathers about the TIF. We like, okay, who are the stakeholders? Have they been identified? Have the meetings been had with them? We kind of like, so have you identified the stakeholders? Have you engaged with them? Have we kind of looked at the historicity, which is a huge thing in equity? We could sit here and say, well, why are we already talking about Black people? They're brown people too, and like Asians, this and like all these other communities matter. If we have limited resources and we have to decide who is most in, like why are we focusing on this particular group for whatever reason? Like the historicity is very important when we talk about that. So these two are kind of related. I was thinking of syncing those, like what are the causes of the issue that we're trying to address? I was thinking of taking out that one. Considering what are the adverse effects of this. So this is kind of just analyzing that you do with any policy, but specifically from an equity lens. So this is kind of a more general thing where essentially this is the guide. So you would score it. Now we have scores from 0 to 5, right? But on this board, you kind of write in here why I think I'm giving it a 3, but you might give it a 3 or a 4 and write it in here, or you might give it here a 4 or a 5 and write it in here instead of having blocks for each specific one. We kind of just do every other one, and then you give it a score. So you explain where it is. This is just kind of a guide of like, well, you should give it a 5 if this is happening. You should give it a 3 if this is happening, and then you give it your score here. That's sort of the general scorecard. And again, I will keep molding these. There are a couple of them I think I could collapse. We can add extra questions, but this is kind of the general scorecard. And I'll take comments in a second. And so there's more questions going down there, and you have a total score. That being said, there are types of projects policies that, given our emphasis on equity, are going to be reoccurring, right? And reoccurring. And in this case, I told you, if you make it general, then people can kind of BS and kind of slip through and not really get to the heart of the questions. If you make it too tight, then you can't use it across. So my thought is that we have this general one. If we have a project that doesn't fit into one of the categories, people use this general one. But if we know we have other things that, sorry, my reminder to drink water, other things that happen more regularly. So I'll use the housing one, for example. We can ask folks to fill out this housing related scorecard, and then we're asking more housing related questions that wouldn't work in a bubble, because if something has nothing to do with housing, it wouldn't work. So if you have a housing related thing, you come in and use the housing one. So far I've kind of identified one for housing, affordable housing. There is a community engagement one, and then I was planning on doing an economic, like a physical building development. And the building development is different than affordable housing, because when they decide to put up a building, literally affordable housing is the tax they pay to put up the building. The goal isn't affordable housing. So I see that as separate from like some big high rise going on. So I plan to do another one of these for the big high rise. So far, in terms of the specialty things that we think we will address a lot, affordable housing, any kind of community outreach practice that they're embarking on, similar to the, like, for instance, this survey that we're creating, we would do a community engagement on the to make sure we're kind of hitting all the groups that we're supposed to, and considering all the things we're supposed to consider. They may choose to look at the city has a budget for summer things, all the movies in the park and all the music in the park and those kind of things. They may choose to take this community engagement and look at their whole bucket of summer things that they spend whatever X amount of budget on, and make sure that they're actually creating a set of activities that serve various, parts of the community. It's not just like, well, this is only serving like certain portions of the community. So you can choose to do it like that. So that's really what I have. I'll shut up now, open it up for questions. Specific questions I have are, what other buckets besides community engagement, housing practices, and like developments, like physical building developments, or it could be a new train stop someday, right? Like it doesn't have to be just a development is not just a building. They could choose to put in a new train stop, and there'll be consequences to that too. What are the specific ones we need to accompany the general one? Because we're not going to have a bucket for everything. That's why the general one exists. But there's some that may come up a lot, and it's better to have a more specific. All right, I'm quiet, willing to take comments, questions. I could scroll to a different section if somebody wants to see it more clearly. It's perfect, Carla. Go to the head of the class.
So I do have a comment. I just so there is a when I do trainings, I tell everyone that I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with uncomfortable silences because there's processing time that's required. So I'm trying to practice not always speaking first because to give other people a time to process, because it does take a little time. So I have a question, and it's from my teacher lens if no one else wants to start. Okay.
Go ahead, LaShondra.
All right. Okay. So I guess just because rubrics, and this is a I know this is we call it a scorecard, but in my teacher head it's a rubric because it's it's a rubric, right? So I guess when I first looked at this, when I saw this, I was wondering. I saw the breakouts, and I was maybe I'm just missing. I may be missing it in my glancing. So I just wanted to. I saw this as like a master rubric because this obviously this is the general one, and I guess my question or my desire was like, how do we make the thread from the I know you can't see me scrolling up and down in your document because I'm in it too, but how do we make the thread from the master scorecard with the different criteria, make that thread clear in the breakout ones? Because I'm looking at, like, I know that the housing one is specific to housing, but the same requirement, it doesn't negate the same requirements from the master one. And I just wanted to know if there was a way that we can make, so the stakeholders in housing, like not necessarily like a one-to-one, but am I making myself clear? Like,
no, that actually
the thread needs to be clear. So if the bottom one is the master rubric, then any other side rubrics that we make
are getting to the same points.
To be pulling directly from that similar language. And then what ends up happening, let's say in the housing one, then the attributes that relate to housing would be, for example, like if I'm looking at identifying inequities, right? So if that's the criteria that we're scoring, which one of these in the housing rubric speaks to that, and can we use the same language, and then for clarification add this is what that looks like in housing.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And that's the joy of now trying to sort of, after pulling things from different areas, because I felt like some did some well, is like trying to make sure it all melds together well. And then the question that's still unanswered in my head that relates to this is, if you have a housing project, do you fill out the primary, we're getting away generally from using the word master, the primary, do we fill out the primary one and then the addendum for housing? Or if you have, do you fill out the primary one and then the addendum for, like, there's a word for it, capital projects, sorry, that's the word I'm looking for.
Project. Okay.
And so
because I almost see this as the primary scorecard as a, like, I'm self-scoring. So if I'm the organization that's have this, I'm building this this new structure or what have you, but I'm grading myself, saying I've done all these things. So here you go. Yes, I've done all these things. I feel like what our project is equitable and we want to go forward. And then I almost feel like then an outsider would, oh, here, this is where we see your holes using the other one. Yeah. But that may not.
And just so we're clear, you're speaking perfect world here. Generally, these are created for organizations or entities of whatever sort, and it's for them to do as they bake the pie.
Yeah.
We are in the situation where we are not inside the entity.
Yeah.
As I said, we're starting here because this is who we are and this is how we can start. Yeah. The goal is that there is a matching one to this. They take it and tweak it, or they start using this one that, I'd love it if the city manager, soon to be whoever they may be, would have a version of this and start requiring
Yeah.
that if the project is coming out of the engineering department, I mean, I'm not like fix the heater in the furnace room, right? But like a capital spending project or something like that. If it's coming out of, and again, using maybe the slightly different criteria of when it gets used, because this is an internal thing and not a community-wide thing when it's used in there, that it gets baked using this. And normally it would be a self-reported thing. But part of the reason is that you have the contact here is that if we are doing it, which is what we have the capacity control right now, where is that page? Why we have the contact here is that I would call, if it was a TIF, I would call Bobby and I would try to find out what was done, have him talk to me about like what he did for for community engagement. I'm scrolling down here, mainly because I don't have an economic version right now. And I will decide from whatever he tells me where I put this. And I would kind of score based on what he's telling me. That's kind of how we are now, but you're right. They're generally created to be self-scored by whoever is leading the initiative. And point fully taken about sort of making sure either we decide eventually that they have to fill out both the general one and quote unquote, we'll call the others addendums for housing, or it's addendum for community engagement or whatever, or they have to in some way match up, as you said, not necessarily one-to-one, but question 2 and 1 and 2 over here are getting to this engagement piece. Question 3 and
right.
different, you know, whatever the next one is. Thank you. That's awesome point.
Carla, so are you working in a subcommittee to further develop this?
Yes, that's why LaShondra has a copy in front of her. Darlene has it. Darlene and I met right before the holiday and we kind of figured out the two.
Yeah, I wondered, I'm like, what? I don't have my own. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, the two, at the time it was the two ones we were gonna kind of use because we felt were positive pieces of it. I ended up finding another one since then. And so, yes, we will continue to work as a committee. Part of bringing it out here is that, like, as we build it, there are things that I'm still very interested in, and Jane, maybe you might be a good person to help with this. Like, what are some of the common types of projects that we kind of foresee happening a lot, and hence we should create a special housing version. I'm guessing there's something about economic, like the TIF would fall under economic, but I honestly just don't get finance enough to be able to figure out if like a TIF would fall in the same category as, say, just the budget for next year, or like if the strategic plan of the city, which I think we do a strategic plan for 10 years in advance, which is kind of more, not morally, but like strategic, like big picture wise, what we want to achieve, and somehow it's supposed to then roll down into our budget and how we're spending our money or whatever. Would that fall under an economic? I don't know. So
We have to figure that one out. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate this. Part of me is also thinking about some of the rubrics that I saw. I mean, I've even seen like the D65 rubric. They use the same 5 or 6 questions. So they can be used for anything, whether it's a budgetary decision, a policy decision, right? And it looks like this sheet you're showing
yeah,
like
it looks
who's
like
most
this.
impacted? Are they at the table? You know, or have we engaged them? Like all these questions, so that it could be used, whether it's used on a budgetary decision, a policy decision, either to add a new policy or get rid of one, et cetera, et cetera. So,
and theirs is very similar to this, which is kind of out of the base of what an REIA, which is the tool created by Ray Forward. So
right.
This is the basis of that.
Awesome.
The specific reason I think that these are necessary is what LaShondra got to. When D65 does it, they're self-scoring, so they know everything that's been going on. When by time we, at this point, see this policy. It's half baked
Mhm.
and we on the outside. And I think there's more specificity needed, as well as a school district or I know D65 uses something like this. And they are actually one of the models I used in taking pieces of this, which again comes from the standard REIA. But generally, if you're in the past, if I'm in a nonprofit or a small school-related like organizations, whether it's a PTA or whatever, there's a smaller scope of stuff that they do on a regular basis because they're in the business of X. With a city, it just kind of blows it wide open in the scope. And so, that's where I was seeing sort of the greater need for like more specialized. And as I said, like the idea here is that the primary, there you go, I almost caught myself, would be the primary, and then potentially these would be an addendum. Or I have to do what LaShandra said and make them kind of line up at least in big picture sections.
Yeah.
So this is not the last time we will see this. I kind of want to show the direction we were going. We will continue to, if anybody is like, hey, can I have a copy to kind of review on my own and read in more detail, great. Otherwise, we'll kind of go back to the table and tell you guys where we're at next month again. And kind of keep working towards it in that way.
Sounds
So I'm
great. Does anybody have any questions or comments? You all have made some real progress. Yeah, Jane.
Thanks so much. It's really a great start on a rubric scorecard. I understand that Kimberly Richardson and with Shanika, Hohenkirk member, we're working on developing with city staff too, some kind of REIA for the city. It's a longer process. I don't know how this fits in with it all, or if the city even thinks about whether, if they could be complementary in a way. And then, as I emailed you, Carla and Alejandra tonight, to the library is working on a similar framework too. And the library director, Karen Danzig-Lyons, would be glad to come and explain where they are in their process. We could see if any of it lines up, if any of it's useful, or if we can share this good stuff with the library. Because I think the library director was really interested in not repeating effort if that could be avoided too. I think they've got consultants working on it.
I was just gonna ask Matt, could you put that sort of in our like agenda to talk about next time so we can kind of put an invitation out to Karen to come chat?
So I'm really wanting to see how this happens, how this gets applied to specific things. And as you suggested, Carla, it could be everything from budget, which I kind of think needs its own appendix rubric, it being such a project and so complicated. And the kind of land use decisions, those development decisions, whether it's housing or any kind of property development needs its own. Not all developments involve housing, the office buildings that go up to. But I'd like to see it applied to, for example, our policy and our practice on how the city issues permits and types of permits for use of the lakefront for events. Now that's a little thing that has an impact, and it's really a little thing, but to apply kind of this equity lens to those decisions too might be instructive at the very least for folks. But
could you say a little more about that? I mean, like, I feel like that might be a relatively narrow thing to pay for, but if I understood a little more about why you think there's an equity issue there, because I don't know how things get used or what the lakefront's used for, or whatever, besides running. We might be able to put in a bigger bucket. So can you explain what you're seeing there?
Yeah, so it's a decision that staff recommends, the city council approves. And so we have a policy on how the city issues permits for lakefront events. And it is everything from the Turkey Trot 5K to other events to the sports events, but also to all of those community picnics or the churches that move their services out to the lakefront. And there's a limited number of them that they issue, especially for the lakefront parks. And it always felt to me as if it was a first come, first serve, and you know who gets to those opportunities faster than others because of access to resource and fewer barriers. And so that's just one example that I think might be interesting, even hypothetically, to kind of test our scorecard to see how those things shake out. And it's a more discrete issue that we could all easily understand without having to read a 500-page budget book, for example.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and then other issues. So do we put the city's decision to accept a fire truck from Northwestern through this, through a scorecard? Are we looking at a city's approval of zoning variances related to kind of land use decisions, or parking fee structure, the reparations program even? These are, citywide policies and programs that it's pretty much everything. As you said, it's a wide range.
And again, the piece that comes before this, but we started here and then we'll work back, is there has to be some sort of criteria. I mean, again, big picture goal is that inside the city, there's a version of this, and you can't bring an idea from whatever department of the city forward without a damn budget, right? Like, you gotta tell how much money spent. Like, we would like this equity lens to be like the budget. You don't come forward with something without a budget. You don't come forward with anything without this equity evaluation of how you're approaching it. We'd love to get there. But for us to review things, there's going to be this kind of, we have these 8 points, and if it meets 5 of the 8 or whatever, which will mean some things get done and not, and we'll start there, and then we'll open it up maybe if we have resources, or if the city hires an actual equity person who knows how to spell equity, because we've had some in the past, then this becomes an internal thing for a paid person to review, and then they could open up the scope a little more. But I made a note, Jane, of the things you said, and we'll see if they're kind of buckets we can put those things in. So there's scorecards for those.
Can I ask, I have just some questions, I guess it's just kind of general, the way things work inside of Evanston policies, and just the way the city works in general. I don't know if this is a question, Matt, that you can answer, or everyone else can answer. But I have 2 questions. One of them is, what is the policy that for the city I know how politics work as far as how politics work as far as the hands and shaking and what have you, but is there a city policy for redirection? Like, for example, we know reparations went through the way it went, and that commission did what it did, and we have what we have right now. The same thing with the TIF, we know that. But is there our biggest hurdle is that we come into the kitchen and the cake's half baked, right? And so is there something in policy somewhere that's like, if a critical mass is reached on disagreement, we have to redirect? Is there something in there, or is it just like, I was voted in and you're gonna trust me in my word? And I'm gonna do what I want to do, because that's really how politics typically work. But we're a smaller town, and maybe we have policies because we're trying so hard to be equitable. Is there something in our city policies that say, when we hit, obviously this commission was created because people saw a need for there to be equity included in the policy making. In order for that to happen, there has to also be a corresponding policy to allow for redirection, or we will always be a mole. You know what I mean? So is there anything, even in the fine print of policy, that allows for redirection if we are saying this is not working? This is not the case. I mean, evidence right now, as far as the TIF and the reparations housing program or whatever, is telling me that no, but I'm wondering if maybe it was ignored. And so that was my first question. And then my other question is, what is, how can we, or what is there a policy for us, for the adoption of this scorecard to be a part of policy making in the city? Like, what, for any, whether it be our scorecard, whether it be whatever, is there a way in which that once this has been created, you know, we've gone through our pilots, we've launched it, we've done that. How do we get, does have to be brought to a vote? Who brings it to a vote? Like, how does it work where we can get this? Look, guys, equity cannot be once the cake is about to get iced. It has to be in the forefront, like we've been saying. So how do we get that to be a part of the, just like we take attendance, you know, in the role, we got to have a quorum before they have a meeting. How does it become a part of city policy where an equity scorecard is now not just a suggestion, but a part of what we do every day? I know those are big questions, but you know, I'm new. So.
I don't have an answer for number one. So maybe Matt will answer that one, but I'll give you my idea. And rules and me don't get along, as you guys notice. But you know, the mayor has told me repeatedly, if we ask him for something, not in this like I'll grant your wishes like a genie, right? Like, but like if we make clear official asks, like he will address them. So I'll just say address, not like grant us anything we want. And so, you know, this is going to be part of the request. So there are two stages to that. One, to get this into quote unquote use, it has to be passed by the city council in the same way when we just revised our sort of whole purpose and mission, whatever, they had to bless it. Great. I could see that, however, going through city council and they're like, everybody reading and they're like, this is marvelous. Because it sounds good. And we love shit that sounds good, right? But my goal is to have something that puts some skin in the game for the city council. Because this sounds great if somebody else, aka us, is just going to evaluate and like they'll have more quote unquote information, but it really has no teeth unless it's being asked for by somebody on the city council. And what the mayor said to me at one point in time, like what he would love to see here is that in the same way people might say, let's just say there wasn't a policy, but there's an issue, right? Something happened that forced some policy to the forefront that wasn't at the forefront. And there's a process by which somebody on the city council can I need a financial review of that. So can whatever department go and give me a financial review and it'll come back the next time. He wants to be able to say, this sounds like we need a full equity review on whatever's coming down the pipeline or whatever, and have a request. If it doesn't start to be asked for in that way, where the people who are actually making the decision are asking for us to put it forward or asking for some group to put it forward or eventually asking that somebody in the city management office do it along with before it comes to city council, until we get to that point, you know, we are the equity mole onto the city's body. But I've been told make a request and it will be reviewed. So that's going to be making it into our request with this, that there are some criteria that, you know, the ways that it's being used, and that, you know, I'd love to get to the point where decisions aren't made unless, you know, or certain decisions that meet the criteria, right, aren't made unless there's a review for this. And when we went into this, for those who are newer, I am not a wishful thinker. I go into these things eyes wide open. And I think we said a couple of times when we started this, if all I could do in 2 years is say, look, I have turned in 20 of these equity and only once has the city council actually fixed, changed, modified, whatever. You know, one of the issues that we said was an equity issue. I am quite prepared for the way politics works to be like, if we don't measure it, we can't change it. So this is our attempt to start measuring it. And so if nothing else, we can say to the public, hey, look, they put us out here, right? We've been putting these out. We've been scoring. Ain't nobody make like, if that's where we get, which I think is closer to reality, maybe we end up somewhere in the middle. We know how these things are, but if we're not measuring it and we're not scoring it in a way that's separate from me just getting up in front, or Alejandra getting up in front of the city council like a regular citizen, nothing's wrong with regular citizens, but like if this body doesn't have any other teeth besides us as citizens stepping in front of the board at the council at public comment, then, you know, what are we even doing? So sorry.
I would say,
I guess I'm looking for a roadmap to teeth. That's what I'm looking for. Like I want to know what is, that's like, so Matt, I guess that's a question to, you know, maybe that's an answer, the one that you can answer, but that's what I'm looking for. Like, I want to be, I'm with you. I try to be optimistic, but I definitely am eyes wide open. But if, you know, even if it is 5 years from now, what is the roadmap that we have? What is that roadmap for a 5-year roadmap? Then okay, then I would like to know, like, what is the roadmap for us to have teeth so that we can affect change in Evanston in the way that we don't feel like we're optional, because I feel like going to the mayor and saying we want to request this, it's like why I can never be a waitress. I respect them, but I can never depend on the kindness of strangers to feed me. You know what I mean? Like I can't do that to put money in my pocket. I can't do that because it all depends on the whim that day. So I guess that's what I would like if you know, to know, Matt, from you or whoever the powers that be, what's our roadmap for this commission to have teeth?
Yeah.
Because we can work on this, we're gonna keep working on this, we're gonna keep that, all this stuff keeps going. But at the same time, eventually we want to have teeth.
Yeah. And I so appreciate that. And part of it, I think is just a lesson learned for someone who's been engaged in policy change. You think that you just get the new policy and you're done.
Yeah,
But
no.
how do you follow up? There's got to be like reporting or monitoring metrics to say, did it do what it was supposed to do? And it needs to be codified, right? Because it's great that we have a mayor right now that seems accessible, but it really needs to be codified, because what if the next mayor is not, right? So, and I would hate to cut off this conversation, everyone, but we're at 8 p.m.
Okay, I'd like to say one other quick thing before we cut that off. One, LaShondra, way to show us that, you know, you're stepping into this co-chair role already. You're like challenging and loving shit out of us in all good ways, like in all great ways. But I want to say that this actually brings up a clear that maybe we need two, I never know the right names for this, right? But maybe we're putting forward this tool, but we also need a written ordinance policy. I never know what the damn words are, but that goes along with it. So we're saying, great, we're giving you a tool, like we're spoon feeding you this. But what I'm asking city council to pass is an ordinance that says this is now their path. And then that ordinance gets tweaked and messed with and whatever, because they're not going to agree to everything, or people are going to be afraid it's going to slow things down too much if they have to do it for everything. And so we're going to make some kind of compromises in there, but maybe what we're creating is two things: the tool and then an ordinance that goes along with it. So the ordinance actually could be voted on and not just the tool. Because as I said, I feel like the city council is going to vote for the tool, but just because they're like, yeah, I mean, the city council voted to have us here, right? And again, we're a mole and we're not really doing much. But so I think you bring up a really good point, that what we might need to create here is two things: the tool and then an ordinance that we want passed about the use of the tool. Yeah. So thank you. More good ideas.
Right.
Matt, you have homework. I'm going to ask that question again next month.
Yeah, thank you. And I will try and have a better answer than I do this month, next month, which, because my answer right now is I don't think there's any policy about redirection. And I think what Carla brought up as building an ordinance, I think that's probably a great way to give this commission more teeth.
Okay. All righty.
Thank you all. Thank you all. So we are finally moving to the fifth and final point on our agenda, which is communication. And we have two pieces on this agenda. One of them is the environmental equity planning investigation, and Andy Schlickman's been with us from the beginning. So he's been patiently waiting to give us a brief presentation on what the environmental equity planning investigation is. And Andy, we know we've seen you before. You've been here. Andy is part of the Environmental Justice Evanston, but if you can give us some quick context and what your plan is and how we're involved in that.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, and it's a pleasure to see and meet all of you. You know, I provided two things. I provided a one-page status report that's in the agenda package, and that's accompanied by the Environmental Justice Resolution that the council passed a year ago, September, and that sort of outlines, I guess, the key things. The second thing is we spoke to Alejandra about making a more in-depth presentation at the February meeting. I was planning on only spending about 5 minutes or so tonight, just giving a brief introduction to what we're doing and where we're at right now. But if anybody has any questions, after my initial comments about sort of the substance of what was in those, what was in that one pager I sent, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those questions. But we would be more than happy and willing to provide a much more in-depth presentation the next time. And that might be a good idea because given some of the discussions we've been having with some council members, the mayor and city staff, they've asked us to prepare some materials, or we are preparing some materials that we're going to be submitting to them in the near future, probably before your February meeting, that fleshes out a little bit more what this environmental investigation would involve, what the planning process would be like. So it probably would be very good to have a more in-depth update at the February meeting. Just briefly, if my name's Andy Schleckman. I've been on Environmental Justice Evanston for about the last 2 years. I live in the 3rd Ward, and the reason I'm here is Environmental Justice Evanston is very much aware that the work we're doing is very closely related to the work that the Commission is doing. And that became more and more clear to me tonight as I listened to the discussion about the equity survey and this equity review scorecard tool. Very, very exciting concepts there. Not dissimilar from some of the things we're thinking about. I'll just make a few really brief points and really then open it up to what questions you have, with the idea that we can give you, a better report or a more in-depth report come February. But, Environmental Justice Evanston, since the resolution was passed, has been, giving a lot of thought and working hard on the environmental justice issue, and especially once Mayor Biss came into office, on a platform that supported environmental justice, and we had an opportunity to talk to him. We've started, really working quite hard to try to move this forward, and we really are very much aware that this needs to be a coordinated effort with especially with this commission, given its charge and its newly revised charge, but also, other parts of the city and other parts of the community. And, we're also, coordinating as best we can with the Environment Board, which, has some view and some interest in these issues. We really do want to coordinate the work that we're doing with this group. It occurred to me as I was listening to this tonight that this really is a two-way street. There are things that we're thinking about doing in our environmental investigation that I think could really be helpful for the work that this commission is doing. And just turning it around the other way, there may be very good opportunities, for the commission and Environmental Justice Evanston through this environmental investigation to accomplish, some of what you're trying to do. This discussion about the scorecard is very similar to some of the things we've talked about it in a little bit more narrow focus, Carla, not just equity generally or what have you, but focusing on environmental justice. And we too are keenly aware that it's one thing to have the information in a policy, but it's another thing to have an actual mechanism by which it's acted upon or enforced, as you were just talking about at the end of that discussion there. So, just in a nutshell, we're looking forward to a collaborative relationship with this group. Environmental Justice Evanston has asked me if it's okay with you guys to act as a liaison between EJE and the commission, so that we have sort of a point of communication between the two organizations or entities, which would help as we move things forward. If that's okay with you guys, I've expressed a willingness to participate at whatever level is appropriate with you and at your meetings to serve that function. So, maybe I ought to just stop there. If people haven't had a chance to read the status report that I submitted, I'd be more than happy to walk through the 4 or 5 key points there. But like I said, we'd be more than willing to provide a more in-depth presentation at your February meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if folks got a chance to read it. Maybe some, I would say, Andy, I mean, if you don't mind, I mean, we can give you, 2-3 minutes if you want to just talk, highlight those top 5.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that, Alejandra. I just didn't want to, especially at this late hour, take up too much time, especially if people had read this already. But I'll just go through the 5 or I guess there's 4 or 5 points that put in there and briefly summarize them. The status report really starts off with just some key provisions of the Environmental Justice Resolution, which the resolution makes it fairly clear that the city is committed to taking this seriously, and that it expects Environmental Justice Evanston, the Evanston Environment Board, the Equity Empowerment Commission, city departments and other community organizations to work together on this, and that's really the spirit in which we're here. We have been working on 5 things, I guess, we have here. We have been talking to the mayor and some city officials about conducting an environmental equity investigation, which would really focus on what are the real facts out there in the community that have an impact on environmental justice and environmental equity issues. As we have worked on this the last couple of years at EJE, we've developed sort of a lot of anecdotal information. We've talked to people. We've been into a couple of the wards and taken tours, and we've heard about the issues, but we feel that probably a more systematic and comprehensive approach to understanding what it is, we call it the nature and extent and causes of environmental injustice in Evanston, that needs to be understood before we go too far in recommending steps that should be taken to correct those, and clearly that has to be done. So that's the environmental equity investigation that we're proposing. And to the people we've talked to so far, we've gotten very favorable reactions. That we've gotten questions. They've asked for more information, but we just had a call last week with the mayor, the new sustainability coordinator Kara Pratt. Dave Stonebeck was on from the Public Works Agency, and Kelly Gandersky was on in her capacity as interim city manager, and we had about good discussion with them. They asked for some follow-up information, but they seem generally in favor of moving forward in this direction. So it's clear that from the discussions that I've heard tonight, there's some overlap, and maybe some significant overlap, with what we're proposing to do and with what this commission is talking about doing. So I think we need to continue to try to work together and have discussions and make sure we're not tripping over each other, and we're actually helping each other out. The second thing on here is retaining a consultant to assist with the investigation. So we've thought about what we're trying to do here, and the nature of sort of the work we want to do. It's not only getting out into the community and talking to people, but it's developing a public engagement process that would go along with this work. It would result in an analysis once we have a lot of the information that we expect to get, an analysis of what policies and procedures and practices of the city relate to the problems we've discovered. And once we understand how they relate to them, what are the options for correcting things in the future and getting to the points that were just being discussed right now. It's always great to identify what a problem is and identify how severe it is, but what you really want to achieve is some long-lasting changes where institutionally, the city takes this stuff into account and makes decisions, hopefully the right decision, based on the information that they have. So, we've actually asked that some ARPA funds be made available so that we can, the city can hire this consultant to assist with the investigation.
Yeah, do you mind wrapping up the last 3?
Sure. And you know what? My screen, oh, there we go. My screen froze up for a second. The resolution specifically calls for an environmental justice mapping tool. I think it's got a fancy name like a GIS, a mapping inventory or something like that. But that would be a tool that would, in a more systematically way, look at issues relating to environmental justice in the city and actually display it on a map. We have been recently starting to conduct listening sessions with residents in some of the likely, impacted neighborhoods, involving people of color and marginalized neighborhoods, to get a sense from them what's on their minds, so that as we plan this investigation, we're not going in any wrong direction and really trying to address, what the issues really are. And finally, we have done one thing called an environmental justice playbook, which is a sort of step-to-step guide for community members to actually report on environmental justice issues they may personally be dealing with, and laying out the steps by which they can, pursue that, both with city staff and in other ways, so they can hopefully try to get some sort of resolution. So we've been working on a lot of stuff. I'm sorry to throw so much information to you at the end of a long meeting like this, but that's what we covered in that status report that was in the agenda package.
Great. Well, thanks, Andy. I would just encourage fellow commissioners to check it out. Andy, happy to have you join us next month to be able to answer any questions that my fellow commissioners or I may have for you. But in the interest of time, we're nearing our second hour here. Thanks for coming, Andy. If you all don't mind writing down some of your questions or comments so we can bring them up at February, we can provide a set amount of time. And this is just a reminder for me that moving forward, we've got to make sure that maybe we give each agenda item a certain amount of time so that we don't have to be at the second hour to be able to take in all this really incredible information. We have one last agenda item tonight, folks. And I think it was just to inform everyone that our enabling ordinance that we had worked on passed through City Council. Matthew, I was told, I believe by City Clerk Mendoza in a conversation I was having, or maybe it was Alderperson Fleming, that our enabling ordinance passed swiftly with no questions or concerns. And so the edits and recommendations we made into the language were all accepted. And if anyone has questions, this is in the language that we developed last year. I think we started in the third quarter of 2021, just to be able to clarify our role, our purpose, the number of members that need to be on the commission, et cetera. And so I just like to say I'm, satisfied that the City Council supported it. It was part of our intent to clarify and to clarify what we felt our appropriate purpose and role was, and that was accepted. And so with that, we have gone through everything on our agenda. Jane, I see your hand and your finger.
Just two things. One is it's a great way to start the new year is with a more clear direction from the enabling ordinance about what our lane is. And the other thing, I'm sure, I hope you caught the new mural at 600 Washington done by our local artist and printmaker, Ben Blount. And please know that the language of that resolution that originated with Council Member Cicely Fleming, you may remember Alejandra, she proposed it to the Evanston Equity Empowerment Commission first. We approved it, and then she took it to the City Council where they adopted the resolution. So just a nice reminder that we played a role in that great mural now. Make sure you find your way there because it's really cool.
Yes. All right, commissioners, if that is everything, that will wrap us up for tonight and for this month's meeting. Thank you all for your engagement and being here with us and being present. All righty, on Carla and my behalf, thank you all very much. Have a good night. Have a safe rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone,
Take care.
please stay safe.
Yes.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.